Good evening. This is James Exum coming to you from my living room and, well, from my studio. It's sort of a living room. I spend so much time in here, I subconsciously think of it as my living room, but it's really my studio in my office in South Austin, Texas. It's August the 3rd. Time's zipping right along, and it's approximately 8:55 in the evening. Tonight's presentation will be on the subject, and it's a fascinating subject, a very old subject, and a very controversial subject on the world stage. And it's entitled Original Sin or Inherent Wholeness. And I'm going to look at it from the biblical point, the Christian Bible viewpoint. I'm going to look at it from the viewpoint of the Hebrews. I'm going to look at it from the viewpoint of the Middle Easterners, the Easterners, the Oriental viewpoint. And I'm also going to look at it from the way the yoga philosophical community looks at it. And so it'll be an interesting essay to examine and cross-examine, so to speak. And I think it could be a teaching aid for those who are feeling guilty about such things. Remember, the doctrine of original sin considers the newborn child, or the soul of the newborn child, endangered if it doesn't seek forgiveness and salvation. So even the tiny little, what we consider, or I consider, an innocent child is guilty until proven innocent. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to allow for usual, because of my voice weakening over time and because of it being affected by my Parkinsonian-like disease, it really isn't as strong as it used to be, and I'm always clearing my throat and getting a little hoarse. I was told on the telephone when I was trying to talk to somebody long distance today, trying to gather some information from Google, that they couldn't hear me. Well, I hadn't thought about that, but that's going to be a problem in the future, it seems, and I'll may have to get an adapter for my phone that raises the volume of my voice. But that's my problem, not yours. I intend to still be here a while, even though I'm going into my 76th year. So enough about me and enough about my opinion on the subject, even though I wrote what is the opinion on the subject, I think, which is about to be transmitted by the voice of the narrator in my Word program within my computer, from my narrator's voice to your ear. So here we go.
Original Sin or Inherent Wholeness. James H. Exum / Sakshi, Austin, Texas. Copyrighted August 3rd, 2026. All rights reserved. The doctrine of original sin looks at the newborn and sees the need for salvation. Sakshi. Original sin, contrasted with other world religions' ideas and the yogic argument for inherent wholeness. Original sin is one of the West's most powerful explanations of the human condition. It says, in its classical Christian form, that humanity is not merely prone to moral failure, but born into a wounded inheritance, a condition flowing from the disobedience of Adam and Eve, developed through Christian interpretation of Genesis, Paul's letter to the Romans, and later theological argument. The doctrine became especially influential through Augustine of Hippo, whose debates with Pelagius helped shape Western Christianity's understanding of grace, freedom, guilt, desire, and redemption. But the question beneath original sin is older than Christian doctrine and wider than the West. What is wrong with us, if anything? Are we born fallen, or do we learn confusion? Is the soul stained, or is the mind clouded? Do we need pardon, purification, discipline, knowledge, awakening, surrender, or remembrance? The world's religions answer differently, and the difference matters. A doctrine of inherited sin looks at the newborn and sees the need for salvation. Yoga philosophy looks at consciousness and sees something already free, hidden only by ignorance. The Western definition of original sin. In Western Christianity, original sin generally means the fallen condition of humanity inherited from the first human disobedience. Catholic theology often describes it as the deprivation of original holiness and justice rather than a personal act committed by the infant. Protestant traditions, especially those shaped by Augustine, Luther, and Calvin, often stress the corruption of the will and humanity's dependence on divine grace. In both cases, the doctrine is not simply about Adam and Eve as ancient figures. It is about the present human being as morally disordered before choice fully begins. The Western definition, therefore, carries three linked claims. First, sin entered human history through a primal rupture. Second, the consequences of that rupture are universal. Third, humanity cannot repair the rupture by unaided moral effort alone. The doctrine does not merely say that people commit sins. It says that something in the human condition is already bent before the first conscious rebellion. Grace, then, is not decoration. Grace is rescue. A brief history from Eden to Augustine. The scriptural roots of original sin are often located in Genesis 3 and Romans 5. Genesis tells the story of disobedience, exile, shame, toil, and death. Paul later interprets Adam as a figure through whom sin and death entered the world, contrasting Adam with Christ. Yet the fully developed doctrine of inherited guilt or inherited corruption did not appear all at once. Early Christianity wrestled with evil, death, baptism, human freedom, and the need for Christ before Western theology gave the doctrine its mature form. Augustine became the decisive architect against Pelagius, who emphasized human freedom and moral capacity. Augustine argued that the will itself is wounded and cannot return to God without grace. The controversy was not abstract. It asked whether human beings are sick and need healing, captive and need liberation, or merely immature and need instruction. Western Christianity largely followed Augustine. The human problem is deeper than bad example. It is a disorder passed through the human family. Original sin and the other 5 major religions. Judaism's inclination, covenant, and responsibility. Judaism reads the Eden story with seriousness, but it does not generally teach original sin in the Augustinian sense. The human being is not born guilty for Adam's act. Instead, Jewish thought often speaks of the Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination, or the inner pull toward righteousness, and Yetzer Hare, the evil or selfish inclination, the inward pull toward appetite, self-interest, and disorder, the inclination toward good and the inclination toward selfishness, appetite, or disorder. The moral drama is real, but responsibility remains personal and covenantal. Humanity is not declared ontologically guilty at birth. It is summoned into obedience, repentance, justice, and repair. Islam's forgetfulness, mercy, and the primordial nature. Islam also rejects inherited guilt. Adam's disobedience matters, but Adam repents and God forgives. Each person is born in a state of fitra, the primordial human nature oriented toward God, purity, and recognition of divine truth. The human problem is not an inherited stigma, but forgetfulness, weakness, temptation, and misdirection. Salvation is not escape from birth guilt, but returning to God through faith, righteous action, repentance, and divine mercy. Hinduism's karma, dharma, and the deeper self. Hindu traditions do not frame the human condition through inherited sin from a first ancestor. They speak instead of karma, the moral law of action and consequence, dharma, right order, duty, law, or the path appropriate to one's nature and station, avidya, ignorance or misperception of reality, samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and liberation. The soul or self is not condemned because Adam fell. The embodied being is bound by ignorance and the consequences of action across time. Some schools emphasize the divine self, Atman, the innermost self or spiritual essence, as ultimately pure. Others distinguish the eternal witness from the changing field of nature. In either case, the deepest problem is not that birth itself is guilt. The problem is misidentification, taking the passing body, role, mind, and desire to be the whole truth of the self. Buddhism's no inherited sin, but conditioned suffering. Buddhism does not teach original sin because it does not center a creator God, a first disobedience, or an immortal soul stained by ancestral guilt. It diagnoses dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, or the instability built into conditioned existence, as arising from craving, ignorance, and attachment. The human being is conditioned, not damned. Liberation comes through awakening, seeing impermanence, non-self, and the causes of suffering clearly enough that clinging loses its authority. Sikhism's ego, divine name, and grace. Sikhism does not teach original sin as inherited guilt. It speaks of how-my, ego-centeredness, the I-making that separates awareness from the divine, as the condition that separates human awareness from the divine. The remedy is not condemnation of the newborn, but remembrance of the one, ethical living, service, sangha, holy fellowship or spiritual community, and grace. Like Christianity, Sikhism gives grace a central place. Unlike Augustinian original sin, it does not depend on a doctrine that all humanity inherits guilt from a first transgression. Yoga philosophies dispute with original sin. Classical yoga, deeply linked with Sankhya, a classical Indian philosophical system that distinguishes consciousness from nature, metaphysics, offers one of the strongest philosophical challenges to original sin. It does not begin with a fallen will, but with a confused identity. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, a foundational text of classical yoga, describe bondage through avidya, ignorance or mistaken seeing the mistaking of the impermanent for the permanent, the impure for the pure, the painful for the pleasant, and the non-self for the self. This is not inherited guilt, it is misperception. The human being is not born spiritually criminal. The human being is born into a field where consciousness becomes entangled with mind, memory, sensation, and habit. Yoga distinguishes Purusha, pure witnessing consciousness, the seer, from Prakriti, nature, matter, mind, and all changing phenomena. When Purusha identifies with Prakriti, suffering arises. But the witness itself is not sinful. It is not stained by desire, fear, grief, or history. The mind may carry samskaras, mental impressions, or habitual grooves left by past actions and experiences. But those impressions are not the essence of the seer. They are grooves in the field, not wounds in the soul's original light. Here the yogic argument turns sharply against the logic of original sin. If the deepest self is pure awareness, then the problem cannot be an inherited corruption of essence. The problem is ignorance, habit, and false identification. The remedy is not merely pardon but practice. Yama, ethical restraints; niyama, personal observances; asana, posture or embodied steadiness; pranayama, breath regulation or life force discipline; pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses; dharana, concentration; dhyana, meditation; and samadhi, absorptive contemplation or integration. Yoga does not deny suffering or moral disorder. It denies that disorder is the final truth of the person. The conclusion is that original sin gave the West a grammar for brokenness. It explained why desire outruns intention, why law alone cannot heal the heart, and why grace must descend where effort fails. Yet when placed beside Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, its distinctiveness becomes clear. Most major traditions do not claim that the child arrives guilty because a first ancestor fell from the Creator's grace. They speak instead of inclination, forgetfulness, karma, action and consequence, ignorance, craving, ego, and estrangement. Yoga philosophy presses the deepest counterclaim. The core of the person is not fallen but misrecognized. Beneath samskara, the subtle impression of past action, beneath appetite, beneath the restless mind and the inherited stories of shame, there is purusha, the witnessing consciousness, the witness, unburned by the fire it observes. If original sin says, "You are wounded before you begin," yoga answers, "You are free before you remember." Between those two sentences lies one of the great spiritual arguments of history, whether salvation is the removal of guilt, the healing of corruption, the ending of ignorance, or the remembering of what was never lost.
And there we have it. It's an important argument, and it'll be argued another 2,000 or 3,000 years, as it has been in the past. But remember, concepts like this, original sin, inherent wholeness, are all the ideas and the words being expressed by men. God did not express this. God is the universe. God does not bother himself with the petty happenings and activities of the human race. He's a bit busy keeping the galaxies and the cosmos and all the planets and their satellites spinning in their orbits. He's a bit busy checking the gauges of gravity and radiation. He's not busy with flooding Earth's planets such as ours, inhabited by creatures like us, to teach them a lesson, to not defy his incredible will, not the God as I see in my heart and in my mind. I see nature as God. I see the universe as God. I see that tiny voice that whispers to my mind and tells me you are doing right or you are doing wrong, on a personal level, not a public or a governmental level, or even in the halls of justice. I see a private God that is part of me and I am part of him, or it. It's actually, in yoga terms, Brahman, who is the equivalent of God in the Christian world, as far as being the creator and the all-powerful, none above, none below. I see him as part of me and I am part of he. This is the way I see it. My mind's not riddled with guilt, because there's nothing to be guilty about. We are all humans, and we're all very actively busy at expressing ourselves by doing human activities on a daily basis, be they good or be they bad. They're just human activities. And so I'll close there, and I hope you gathered something from this. It's gone a bit longer than I wanted to, but again, I keep repeating myself and saying complex ideas take complex explanations. So I want to say thank you again for coming to visit me. I hope you enjoyed it. Be good to yourself, be good to others, and be good to strangers. And remember all the troubles of the world that we're experiencing now. And I'm not casting blame on anyone, but all the troubles that we seem to be experiencing, they too shall pass. Good night to you, and thank you. Share this video with others if you feel like it, and if not, that's okay too. Good night.